Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards is the fourth game in Kirby's Dreamland lineage, following the three numbered entries, and all of which except for the first one were directed by Shinichi Shimomura. The Dreamland series is marked by a relative simplicity. As the Superstar legacy would begin to expand the movesets outwards for Kirby's copy abilities, the Dreamland games kept each ability simple, only having one or two actions per, but began to mix them up by adding in combinations with Kirby's animal buddies. Kirby 64 lacks the animal buddies, but introduces a similar system to give its otherwise simple abilities some variety. Each of the 7 standard abilities obtained from enemies can be combined with any of the others, itself included, for a total of 35 simple one-move abilities, and experimenting with these is the spice that takes Kirby 64 up a level from being a basic, good Kirby game. Kirby 64 was a fairly late era N64 game coming out in 2000, which caused it to be moderately overlooked, but it's consistently seen re-releases since, on both the Wii and Wii U virtual consoles, as well as Switch's N64 online service, so it's clearly been available. I remember first falling in love with it on the Wii. In large part, Kirby 64 is pretty much as standard as Kirby gets. You give enemies the sloppy, steal their abilities, and walk right until you hit the end of a stage, with each world except the first, and I guess the last, having 5, and there being 7 worlds in total. Kirby 64 is chronically laid back. It's pretty easy, slower than hell. Kirby walks like the world isn't days from ending. Even the enemies have this mindless nonchalantedness about them, as if they couldn't give a damn if Kirby lives or dies, but they may as well try. And even as you move towards the end, the stages are pretty bouncy and light, but with great variety. It's not a game that challenges you much, sans a few of the bosses being a bit tricky, but part of the fun of Kirby is that you could also challenge yourself by using bad abilities or no ability at all, something I did many times as a kid. The abilities are the real joy of the game. The core group are extremely basic, as are their doubled up forms. Both Burn and the Burn combination propel Kirby forwards on fire. It's a bit unwieldy and often puts you in kinda bad positions, with the enhanced Burn sending you even further. Stone and Double Stone are amusingly broken, turning Kirby into a statue, but while he loses his ability to jump, he can still walk around invincible and killing anything he contacts, with Double Stone being even larger, which doesn't really make it any more or less broken. Ice causes Kirby to spin around breathing icy air that freezes enemies, who can then be touched to slide them along the ground as projectiles, while Double Ice is actually a bit unique, turning Kirby into a giant rolling snowball of death, which is fun, and a bit different from standard. Needle and Double Needle turn Kirby into a big ball of spikes, with Double Needle having a larger range and a silly assortment of pointy objects like a cactus, a bee stinger, and a pencil. It makes Kirby functionally invincible and into a blob of damage, but he can't move while spiky. Bomb lets Kirby throw a bomb, and holding B longer lets him change his throw arc from a more horizontal one to a more vertical one, while Double Bomb instead shoots homing missiles, which are actually kinda hard to make work. Spark gives Kirby an electric field that hurts enemies and breaks projectiles, and he can waddle slowly left and right while using it, and Spark generates a large magnetic field that calls lightning down to zap enemies within it, although it shrinks significantly when Kirby moves while it's active. And Cutter and Double Cutter let Kirby throw his face as a boomerang, with Double Cutters being bigger, although while it's flying around, Kirby can't puff up and float and has to wait for his face to come back to do much of anything, which is a bit of a bummer. Outside of Cutter, the core stable of abilities would be pretty fine. They're all simple but functional, however the real wacky and fun stuff comes in pretty much everything else. Some of them are incredibly powerful, some are honestly fucking dreadful, but experimenting is half the fun. There are ones like the Burn Bomb combination that turns Kirby into a firecracker who can explode on command up to 3 times before landing, and each time he does so, there's a larger explosion. Burn Cutter is a flaming buster sword that Kirby lugs around behind him, which can inherently damage enemies and can be held above Kirby's head or even thrown. Stone Needle is a drill that drags Kirby along the ground behind it. Stone Cutter lets Kirby carve himself into statues of the animal buddies from prior Dreamland games, each with their own abilities, some useless like Kine, because he's a fish, and others like Ku, wildly overpowered as it's a stone ability that can fly. Ice Cutter lets Kirby ice skate around, greatly boosting his speed. Spark Cutter's a dual-bladed lightsaber, badass. And Bomb Cutter is my absolute favorite. A shuriken that disappears when thrown, embeds itself in an enemy, and then blows up a second later. It's not only great for being an incredibly straightforward projectile, which is honestly kind of rare in this game, but it is so fucking cool, so stylish, so satisfying. And that's just some of my favorites. There are plenty of other completely usable or even good ones. There's also a lot of duds too, don't get me wrong. Burn Ice turns Kirby into a tremendously bad melting ice cube that I do not know what you do with this. Needle Spark turns Kirby into a lightning rod that only damages enemies directly above him. Bomb Spark is a worse version of the Fire Bomb, but lights up a singular dark room in the game for a puzzle, and so on. And plenty of middling abilities just kind of float around too. The game does occasionally force you to use a specific ability, and these are almost always indicated by an item that is colored with a checkerboard pattern of the two ability colors it needs, which is also a bit lazy, but it does force you to use some abilities you definitely wouldn't otherwise, and also encourages experimentation. Occasionally you even have to drag these things through almost the entire level. It's a bit lame that some of these require abilities not found in the level, a little flagrant on the padding, but it's a decent idea to force you off the Ninja Star. These force ability uses, as well as other small puzzles or exploration-based things in the environment, often reward you with the titular Crystal Shards. For how prominent they are in the title, you think that they would do more, but they're simply a requirement for the true final boss. However, they do a decent job of incentivizing, exploring, experimenting, and taking on a few of the game's harder challenges very occasionally. Kirby 64 is one of my favorite looking games on the console. Like everything else, Kirby made the jump to 3D, and while I like the N64 aesthetic, a lot of games, even the great ones like Mario, end up with vast, empty worlds. Keeping Kirby a 2D game, or a 2.5D game if you want to use that I guess, seemed to help. The limited scope let them craft very detailed and shockingly varied worlds, with each world having a general theme but squeezing a ton of variety out of them. Pop Star starts as a generic grassy world but quickly shifts to an incredible autumnal forest, then to DDD's castle. The desert world starts as a desert, shifts to ancient catacombs and tombs and the like, then murky caves, then an alien spaceship, and on and on. While not as stylized as its Dreamland predecessors, which shifted to an incredible pastel and crayon art style in later entries, Kirby, the enemies, and the entire world are light, fluffy, and bouncy. The N64's primitive 3D hasn't really put a dent in Kirby at all. The new designs in this game also deserve some love. Ribbon, Kirby's new friend, is an adorable addition to the cast. NZs are the new generic enemy, although they only appear a few times. They're little spawns of dark matter, and they're very cute despite their simplicity. And the final boss, 02, is really very Kirby final boss, if you get me. This of course extends to the signature fantastic music of the series. While not the game with the most iconic music, where stuff like Green Green's Gourmet Race, DDD's theme, and the Revenge of Meta Knight from other games have passed into legend, the game features a fantastic selection of bouncy and bubbly tracks that just scream Kirby, and a few, especially the true final boss music, have themselves kinda passed into legend as well. Kirby music hits in a way few other game soundtracks do. This game is fairly slow-paced and laid back even for Kirby, but the music completely no-sells this with high-energy compositions that make every screen feel like the beginning of a new adventure and heighten the contrast of a serious threat to all life with the pink blob that's gonna fix it. It's great. Pop Star is probably the strongest world in the game, maybe not thematically, even though it squeezes some variety out of the grass world, with the autumnal forest being especially beautiful, but because it rapid fire gets you all your allies, who each serve as a stage boss. Dark Matter turns Waddle Dee into Waddle Doo, who's a joke fight as other Waddle Dee boss fights in this series have been. He dives back and forth and face plants. It's adorable. Waddle Dee aids Kirby in multiple levels, primarily in short sections in vehicles, sleds, minecarts, and the like, where Kirby and Waddle Dee can only jump to dodge obstacles, which are nice little change-ups. The second stage, the beautiful forest one, notably contains every ability within the first two screens. You can quit out and keep them, so you'll get used to stopping here a lot. Adeline is the second buddy. She may or may not be the same character as Otto from Dreamland 3, but there's been some surprising dodginess over that whole situation. She's a little painter girl and appears in stages to offer puzzles based around her drawings, or to just draw you a nice health pickup or something. Her fight is really fun and creative too, where she produces little crayon versions of common enemies, then creates two mini-bosses, the Ice Dragon from Dreamland 2, which otherwise doesn't appear, and a tiny version of Dark Matter, the final boss of the same game, and the penultimate boss of Dreamland 3, although in a much more simplified form obviously. Although like Waddle Dee, she ends the battle in a tackle that kills her if it lands. These idiots are so fucking cute. In the third stage, DDD gets in on the action. Possessed by Dark Matter, he dives at Kirby for a bit, then floats flips around and dives bomb him, and while he's standoffish and reluctant to help, as is Kirby tradition, he joins the party and appears very infrequently to backpack Kirby around while using his hammer to smash walls, which is a nice little twist on the standard platforming stuff in the game. Wispy Woods always gets the short end of the stick. The boss fight is insanely creative, don't get me wrong, with Wispy in the center of a small ring attacking outwards with his roots, but Kirby also slaughters his children in front of him, just cheerfully holding his sword backwards as they walk into it. Have you ever wondered who the real bad guy is? Rockstar has lots of fun gimmicks. What could be a basic desert world quickly shifts into tombs that slowly fill with sand. It's not all that exciting, unfortunately, because there's an awful lot of emphasis on slow here. Oh no, Kirby, you're gonna get crushed. Although stage 2 makes up for it with some tighter platforming and a DDD section. The third stage has a notable annoyance in a coin flip to take the right path to get a shard. It's just generally obnoxious to get punished in this way, even more so than have the right power ones, because at least those feel kind of rewarding in the way that they force you to experiment some and you have to like drag them through the level and survive with the bad abilities. The spaceship at the end is a very funny twist as sort of like an Ancient Aliens motif, with a really grand approach to the ship and some exciting platforming on its weird geometric shapes, and with one of the game's more creative uses of Force abilities, in that Kirby can use the light bulb to see a pattern in the dark as opposed to just being a colored wall. The boss is very strange and unique. Picks is a trio of wireframe blades, one red, one green, one blue, which just so happen to be the colors often used to represent a 3D axis. The fight consists of dodging around their variety of attacks as they chase you, spin around in various directions, and you attack. Tracking all three makes the whole thing a bit exciting, as you kind of have to have an eye on all of them, or at least whichever two are adjacent to you at all times, but I think the fight is less interesting than the design is. Aqua Star has all the inherent problems water worlds often do. The water sections are sluggish, and this game is already fucking slow, but despite the name, it does its best to avoid exceedingly long underwater segments, for the most part. Going for more creative ideas that have water segments, but also have more going on. The first level is an island hop across a series of bridges that transitions to some comfortable caves. Like everything in the game, it's just the comfiest place you've ever been. The river level is both visually distinct for its jungly atmosphere and perhaps the only level in the game with a real gameplay shakeup that isn't a Waddle Dee segment or a DDD bit, where the water pushes Kirby with it or pushes against Kirby uphill. Makes the game almost normal speed if you're going with it, or even slower for a bit. It even gets some fun themed obstacles like logs rolling downstream. The beach and its caves are just cute, especially the sand castles and stuff early on, plus you need Bomb Cutter for a shard, and you know, the ninja stars are the coolest shit in this game. I'm never gonna complain when I'm given a chance to use them. The fourth stage is where they finally pull the trigger and do the thing. Holy hell, this underwater cave is slow. It's slow, even for Kirby 64 slow. And most enemies down here don't even give abilities. Sure do love that you can miss the shard and not swim back to it. Have fun restarting. Truly miserable. Water stages rarely work, but this is almost comical. Of course, this is complemented by a wholly underwater boss, Acro the Killer Whale, and it's truthfully just a little bit rough. The first phase on the seafloor is pretty whatever, but when it becomes a vertical scroller, it just feels borderline impossible without an ability. You really need to just walk in with something good, like, you know, ninja stars, and keep it for the entire level. I do like that they tried something different and tried to make an underwater boss, and Acro is really fucking cute, but it was probably just a bad idea from the start. Neostar is the jungle planet, but as always keeps things fresh each level. It starts very jungly, sort of a Lost World vibe with the dinosaurs and the little caveman guys. Feels really fucking weird to watch Kirby kill something so human. Kind of uncanny. Like, you know he could do that too in real life, and he would just choose not to, but like at any given time he could. The vine section is an idea, but at the same time, Kirby can jump like 20 times, so it does feel a bit redundant with his, you know, baseline abilities. The cave level could feel a bit samey, given the last world had some, but it does a decent job of standing out. The purple crystals give it a really unique flair, and it begins with a really long minecart section. There's a few unique ideas after, too. The whole cave is covered in a thin layer of water, and there's even a short segment where the water pushes against Kirby, like the river. It's actually a very obnoxious section, where dodging enemies and cannons is a lot harder than it seems, but it's a nice bit of challenge for this otherwise very easy game. The third stage is a series of stone pillars in the sky. hey, that's the guy, I know him. The coolest thing going on is that the game really pushes the drill on you, starting you with both its elements for free and making the first shard very easy with it. And it's just one of the coolest powers in the game, and you get lots of fun runways to drill through and shoot the drill into. Kind of a perfect level, if I'm being honest. The big finale is perhaps Kirby 64's most tense level. I mean, that's a low bar to clear, but there's immediate pressure to keep moving thanks to lava rocks raining down, and it keeps it up with an escape from a wall of lava. It's rare that the game feels like it wants you to keep moving instead of plodding along and hunting for secrets. There's moving platforms, rising lava. It's a really exciting conclusion to a world in a way this game rarely ever explores. The boss Megman is more cute than anything. It attacking from the background and leaving its tentacles vulnerable is a little bit of a cute twist on the idea of like wispy woods. I also like that it actually messes with the platforms that you stand on and lifts them up to crush you, so you have to kind of be aware and jump between them. It's nice. There's nothing all that special about it, but it's nice and one of the more reasonable ones to do without abilities, which I appreciate. Shiver Star has Kirby 64's most infamous little detail. The planet itself is a frozen hellscape, but its layout and moon on the world map are pretty much Earth. It's not even the last time Nintendo would look to an odd future for Earth given Pikmin, and it also heavily flavors the world, with lots of factories and other human-like areas, pointing to some real strange lore as Kirby loves to do. It starts pretty comfy, a sled ride, frozen ponds, igloos, and even in the second level, it's just a silly little cloud level. Maybe the worst level in the game, granted, for making you drag the horrible lightning rod ability through the whole thing for a shard, but pretty normal. Then all of a sudden it's an abandoned mall with conveyor belt and evil Venus flytraps, giant frogs. It's not presented in any kind of eerie way, but it is an interesting shift from the ice world in conjunction with the weird post-human Earth stuff, as is the deadly abandoned factory of conveyor belts and giant crusher robots that actually chase you for a little bit. HRH is an interesting boss, sort of just a big robot that looms in the background and makes its arms vulnerable during attacks. This one borders on unwinnable ability lists for the simple reason that it almost never drops projectiles, and holding a projectile makes its attacks very hard or sometimes impossible to dodge. Also, the laser tail is pretty shitty. Its final form, where it turns into a giant lobster, is hypothetically cool, like visually great. It's chasing you awesome, but God help you if you end up underneath it, because it moves at such a speed that you can never catch up and will inevitably get fucked up by the platforms behind it going away. It can be kind of devastating to get to the second phase, fall behind, fall off, need to go somewhere else to get an ability, come back, and do phase 1 all over again. Ripple Star sure is weird. For a final world, it just kinda is. It's home to the fairies, like Ribbon, and is kinda just calm. The first stage is a serene park with a few buildings, the second is a sewer with way too much water to swim through, and the third is 5 rooms of enemy gauntlets that need to be destroyed to move on. It's neat to see the place you've been trying to save, but shouldn't there be like some amount of dark matter's influence here? You know, more than just having a few enemies here and there? Like, I don't know, just go wild with it. Have some giant tentacles to dodge or something, or evil, I don't know, evil fairies. This charming world evolving into darkness would have been really cool. I don't know. Miracle Matter is a cool final boss though, way better than the actual final boss, if a bit annoying. It's just a weird geometric shape covered in eyes, immune to all damage. It's kinda spooky to be honest. Miracle Matter has 7 forms, 1 for each of the base abilities, and can only be damaged by the ability it gives you in that form, or by the projectiles it drops in that form, although there's definitely times where carrying an ability through nets you some protection for the next one. Some forms are worse than others. Spark is a gigantic pain in the ass with targeted lasers that wrap around the screen, bounce off of Miracle Matter at weird angles, and move incredibly quickly. Bomb is also very annoying with its bouncing bubbles to dodge, but others like Cut or Needle are virtually free and incapable of touching Kirby unless you really fuck up. It's a bit lame that you can't use mixed abilities here, given, you know, that's the game's big gimmick, but forcing you to be improvising constantly, deciding if an ability is better than its projectiles, utilizing abilities for protection and later transformations, it's all great stuff that is like maybe the best you could make a Kirby boss to utilize the ability mechanic. It's so clever. It's honestly so clever. And it's actually quite challenging and fun for it, except for Spark. Spark is just unfair. They should have rethought Spark, just gone back to the drawing board on that one. With every Crystal Shard collected, Kirby gets to the series tradition secret boss, and boy is it something. Zero 2 is... it's not all that clear really. The previous game in this sub-series, Dreamland 3, had a giant entity known as Zero who worked with dark matter, was created by dark matter, is the true form of? I don't know. Kirby lore has gotten increasingly strange, and the games rarely care to think too hard on it, even though the fans do. Zero 2 is probably the undead return of Zero in the form of a biblically accurate angel. A giant white blob that cries blood when hit, with a halo, and also a giant vine penis. It's a lot to take in. Interesting for sure, but it certainly started the trend of weird, godly final bosses in this series, even though Zero and Dark Matter are gone for good at the end of this game. Zero 2 isn't much of a fight. It's the obligatory Kirby shoot-'em-up segment, which is in almost all of these games. It's like weirdest series tradition ever, but from a rear perspective. It can be fairly hard to see the projectile he shoots out. They're subtle little sparkles that blend in, while Kirby and Ribbon also block your view, but you kinda just mash away. Whether that's at the eye, the halo, or the thorn, it's really simple. Is this a Star Wars reference? This and Bomberman Hero both did this. What the fuck was with N64, 3D, 2D platformers, and fucking Star Wars metal scene? Kirby 64, the Crystal Shards, is cute. It's not a great game in a lot of ways, it's slow, it's usually kind of unexciting, it's simple, finding the Crystal Shards can be a giant pain in the ass, specifically the ones that require out-of-level combos, but I think it has a simple charm, a joy really. There's a simple fun to mashing two abilities together and seeing what pops out, and I haven't spoiled even half of them. Seeing what the game wants you to use, you walk into a level and there's two dudes right there, and who knows what that's gonna get you. The mix abilities are all over the place, from some crazy fun ones like the Ninja Star and the Flaming Sword, to borderline unusable ones like the Flame Spark combination where Kirby sets his head on fire. It's an inherently flexible and therefore fun system to mess with. Levels ooze an unending charm. Musically, you got the classic Kirby stuff going on in the best ways, just these cozy, catchy, poppy tracks constantly, and you always get a surprise on what's coming next. Limiting the Crystal Shards to 3 per stage means it's fairly easy to breeze through and dig enough to find everything in one run, outside of some cheap shots with power combinations, and it makes every level incredibly satisfying on its own. It also just brings back fond memories for me, although at this point I consider it more of an art game than a game. A little more challenge here and there would be nice, and not in the way that, like, Acro is. But it's also kind of just fun to see and hear the game because it looks so nice, it sounds so nice, and Kirby's just fucking adorable. You really can't help but smile in the same way you do when Mario Galaxy throws a cute new idea at you, or Astrobot for a more recent example. It doesn't need to be Resident Evil 4 or Bloodborne. It's already good at the one thing it actually wants to do, and that's making you smile.